Hello, I'm just going to introduce myself. You can see my name on the bottom of the screen. I'm Lyndon Farrington, and over to the left is David Leity, and on the screen there is John Smith. We'd just like to bring this video to the public attention, the plight of the story of Billy Peach and his daughter Leona. Billy Peach approached me in my role as a constable for the Common Law Court. I'm also a commissioner for the Common Law Court, as is David on this call and John Smith. So Billy came to me with a problem, and the problem is that his daughter had been removed from his house. He'd had his door kicked in by the police, barricaded him into his bedroom, held him down while they dragged his daughter, 12-year-old Leona, kicking and screaming out of the property. And my understanding is that Leona was fought off the police and or social services with some kind of draw edge. She was trying to defend herself, so she obviously did not want to be torn away from her father. Now, when I first heard this, that was disturbing enough, but then I asked why this had happened. Obviously, they didn't just turn up for nothing. So I asked a lot of questions, and what I was told by Billy, maybe a couple of months ago from now, was so disturbing to me on my early journey in common law. I've been studying this now for 2 years, so considerably earlier than the two other guys on this call. So I realized that this was way beyond my level of experience, and because David lived in the area, and because he'd served 24 years, I believe 24 years as a serving police officer, as a detective as well, and studied common law longer than me, and obviously John Smith, we both brought this to the attention of John Smith at a later stage. But the information that I received was so disturbing that I frankly didn't believe it at first. So I took it to David as his role as a former policeman to figure out if this was actually true. That Billy was the father of Leona. He had Leona with the mother, of course. By the time Leona was less than 12 months old, they'd split up, and Mum then went on to form a relationship with another guy. Now, this guy was known to Billy. He discovered that this guy was suspected of breaking the arm and the nose of his own child. So Billy had repeatedly warned the social services that this guy should not be in his daughter's life, the baby's life. And he was absolutely right, because by the time the baby Leona was just 23 months old, she was raped, and she bled so badly, she nearly bled to death. The surgeon, the doctors told them that she nearly lost so much blood that she nearly died as a result of this rape. And if that doesn't get any worse, there was 17 human teeth bite marks on the entirety of baby Leona's body. There was an enormous court case, as you'd well expect. And the judge, on his, he found the man guilty. He very much wanted to send this man to jail for life. And this made the national press, as it should. And the judge, his comments was he wished he could throw a millstone around the neck of this man. He was so appalled by what had happened, very much wanted to give a life sentence, but because of some technicality, could only give 17.5-year sentence. Now this man, Leona now is 12 years old. It's all likelihood this man is out on the street now, or very likely to be released soon onto the street. So Leona's life, I believe, is in danger anyway with having this man around in the public domain. What happened to Mother? Well, Mother was found guilty of neglect and very much part of this, and she received a 2.5-year custodial sentence as a result of this. None of them showed any degree of remorse during the case, and certainly Mum didn't seem to learn her lessons. After this, she then formed a relationship with another known paedophile, and they had a child, and that child was removed at birth. So not a very good background. But Billy, when he found out all about this, and bear in mind, Billy had warned the social services 5 times about this man. And this man was only in Leona's life for 5 months when he did that. 5 months. And so Billy then fought like hell to get Leona in his care, which he did. He was successful. My understanding is that Leona came to live with Billy about a year later when this case had died down. And nothing else was reported right up until the time of last summer, this summer, that when Leona was, Billy decided to homeschool Leona. And there was no complaints about Billy's parenting skills. But what did Billy do wrong? What law did Billy break? The answer to that question is absolutely nothing. Billy had an opinion. That's it. He just had an opinion about the COVID era. And he started posting vociferously on social media. And because he was posting against the narrative on social media, the mother, this came to the attention of the mother, and the mother approached social services and started saying to the social services that Billy has obviously lost his mind and he's not a fit parent. And because of this, the social services approached Billy, and Billy, I suppose he made the mistake of not really engaging with them, and maybe he started shouting and got a bit aggressive, but certainly no violence. And all of a sudden, because he didn't engage with them, 6 policemen kicking his door down to drag Leona, the only human being that has protected Leona, is ripped away from him by 6 policemen. And that was the Billy Peach that I got to listen to. And it was the first case of common law court that I've ever dealt with. And obviously it left me very, very disturbed. And this is why I took it to David Leahy, 24 years in the police. You must have much more experience than me and John Smith. So that's what we did. And we put together through the common law court, and I'll let John finish off in a few minutes about this, a lawful notice that David Leahy and we were going to take a lawful notice to the county hall in Exeter. And what really threw the cat amongst the pigeons was we were going to serve this lawful notice to them, saying that you just can't do these things. You do not own the legal fiction of Leona Peach. You don't own it. So 2 letters were sent out to Billy. Now, bear in mind, he's broken no laws, whether common law or statutory law. No laws have been broken. And they've torn his daughter away, which is absolutely disgusting, in my opinion. And they were not happy with that. The county solicitor, whose name I'll find here for you, is Jan Shadbolt. And she works out of County Hall in Topsham Road, Exeter. Jan Shadbolt and the lady in charge of social services for this case, whose name is Julie Mepham, and Julie Mepham is also works from the same building in County Hall, Topsham Road, Exeter. Forgive me for lack of detail on this, but between Jan Shadbolt and Julie Mepham, they wrote 2 letters to Billy. And they said that Billy, oh, by the way, I ought to backtrack a little bit. On one of Billy's contact visits, because this apparently happened in the summer of 2021, and one of Billy's contact visits, little Leona begged her father to take her away, and Billy, I suppose, foolishly did. And the police caught up with him later that same day. And he is now facing court proceedings in the magistrates' court, I believe, round about 19th or 20th of January, for the incredible thing of abducting his own child. I don't think there's a living man or woman that wouldn't have done the same thing, but he has to face the statutory courts at 19th or 20th for that. And from the information that's been disclosed to me, the social services have an interim care order, and they're looking to place, get this, they're looking to place Leona back with the maternal family, with the mother's relatives, introducing the mother back into Leona's life with this man who's probably out there already. I can't find words to describe. The only defence I can possibly give to Jan Shadbolt and Julie Mepham is that you don't know the backstory. If you knew the backstory, what on earth were you thinking of to consider reintroducing Leona into the mother's life? That's for you to think about as a professional. So you have dragged an innocent man into the statutory courts at the end of January 2022 to answer for nothing else than defending his own daughter, right? But you know, you didn't leave it like that, did you? You sent letters to Billy, and you lied, because you said to Billy in those letters that Leona wanted the COVID-19 vaccination. And you said to Billy in that letter that you were given him 14 days to get legal representation, and after the 14 days that you had the right, which you don't, to take Leona to a place where she will be injected because she wants this. Okay, so can you imagine Billy's response to this, knowing his own daughter, knowing her own views, completely against the experimental injections? And so he completely lost the plot, and he was begging everybody for help, and so he should. The next thing that happened was I received a phone call that from Billy that Leona had absconded from her care, the foster carer. Incidentally, this foster carer was 2 hours away by car, according to Billy, on the opposite side of the county. And I asked Billy, I said, is Leona streetwise? He said, no. Do you think she could find a way with any kind of transport? No. I said, well, she's not going to turn up at your house then. So now Billy told me this at tea time. And I learned later that day from the police in person that she'd absconded at 7:30 in the morning. Okay. And so David Leity and I were now sat there with a bit of an academic problem. We were wondering, we were supposed to be going to Exeter on the Wednesday to submit this lawful notice. So I was on my way down to Cornwall, where I live in the Midlands, to sit and work with Dave on the Tuesday, and then we were going to go together. We had maybe other papers for another case to deliver on the Tuesday. So I was on standby for that. And on my way down, as we go through Devon, I thought I'd call in to see Billy. And I called in at night, and when I got there, I saw a police car outside the house. And so I parked up and went to find the police officers who were hiding around the back. And I introduced myself to the police and said, what's going on? And they said, they've come here for an update on Billy and he won't come out. Perhaps you can help. And I introduced myself as a constable for the common law court. And so I went to the letterbox and started bear in mind, I've never physically met Billy until that moment, spoken to him lots of times, but persuaded Billy. I said, look, you'll be okay with me, nothing's going to happen, come out, they just want to talk to you. And they were asking if Leona was there. Well, obviously she wasn't, and so Billy quite rightfully was asking them questions, and so they were just turning up for an update. But I don't quite believe that, because down the road I saw another car parked with two ladies in, dressed in black. They weren't on a night out, and one of them was sat there with a face mask on. And I think clearly these ladies were social services waiting to pounce on the police's say-so. But the police very disingenuously said to me, we were just turning up for an update, which does not explain who those ladies were parked up at the end of the street. So that was it. I realised I was asking how far it was from there down to the end of the country, and I thought we're just wasting our time now. So I decided to turn around and head home. Now, the next morning, David receives an anonymous phone call, a withheld number, to tell him that overnight, Leona had incredibly turned up at Billy's house. Now, I say incredibly because I'll just remind you, this is apparently from where the foster care is to Billy's house is 2 hours by car. So how on earth does a 12-year-old get across country 2 hours by car? Well, the anonymous phone call told David that she got on the bus, a train and a taxi across the county and hidden, waiting for the right time to knock on her father's door. And Billy had promised, quite rightly, to ring the police and give any update. And the anonymous phone call told David that this girl, Leona, had begged her father not to be returned, not for the reasons that you and I might think, but because she was being offered a haircut in exchange for the COVID-19 vaccination on Monday, the 20th of December, 9 days after the letter that was sent by the county solicitor and the woman in charge of social services, when they said clearly in those letters they were giving him 14 days to seek legal advice. They were going to take Leona on the 9th day, and Leona must have known this to have triggered her to have run out of the house. And bear in mind, Leona, to my knowledge, has never absconded from the care of her father, but she ran like hell on a bus, a train and a taxi, and miraculously turned up overnight at her father's house. And her father still went, apparently, according to the phone call, to ring the police. But she begged him not to, and they've since disappeared. So that has given David and I enough information to sit down with John Smith, and we finished off on the Tuesday, the 22nd of December. We finished off this lawful notice, and we added the information at the end of it, which is the crucial update, which I'm hoping John will put up on the Common Law Court website for public information for people to see. And he said, it's just come to my attention. This is written by David because I've asked David to take ownership of the legal fiction of Leona, to highlight that the state has absolutely no rights in this case. It's come to my attention a living child referred to in this notice, Leona Peach, has just absconded whilst in the care under the authority of social services. I also believe she has now turned up at her father's, Billy Peach. The information to assist you is as follows. I received a call from a withheld number which transpired to be a friend of Billy Peach to inform me that overnight Leona had arrived at the family home. Billy went to immediately update the police. However, Leona pleaded with him not to, on the grounds that she did not want to be vaccinated on Monday, 20th December. She went on to explain she was offered a free haircut if she consented to a free vaccination on Monday the 20th. On Monday the 20th, Leona left the house at 7:30 in the morning. She previously planned the route from her foster carer's home to her family home. She used a train, a bus and a taxi to arrive in her hometown. This displays incredible determination to return to her father. Devon County Council have failed in their duty of care for Leona and have put her in an extremely vulnerable position, exacerbating her anxiety to such a level that she had no other alternative but to travel alone to her father and her perceived safety. The fact that a vaccination was planned for Monday the 20th means that you blatantly lied in your letter dated 9th December, in which you promised Billy Peach she had 14 days to seek advice before you would proceed with the vaccination. Additionally, you also stated that Leona Peach wished to receive the vaccination. The caller explained to me that Leona is very much against it. Should Leona Peach be required to testify in court, she would confirm that she never consented to a vaccination. Leona was not made aware it was an experimental vaccine and felt that she was being coerced with offers of a free haircut to comply. Now, based on this information, Billy Peach made the decision that Leona Peach was in significant danger whilst in your care. The fact that she absconded only demonstrates the utter incompetence that you have shown whilst supposedly performing the required duty of care towards her. I do not know where Billy and Leona Peach are. All I have been informed of was that they are safe and well. I have been made aware of an upcoming case in January in relation to this matter, but I suggest there be an emergency hearing to deal with this as soon as possible. Whilst I am aware of this issue needs to be resolved, in the meantime, I suggest that Leona Peach is allowed to remain with her father for either 14 or 21 days. This will allow us to resolve this situation whilst ensuring that she remains safe and protected, whilst being able to spend the festive period at home. Leona is still very distressed and needs the comfort of her father to reduce any further anxiety and damage. That's the end of the lawful notice. So that's the background to something that I find absolutely sickening to the stomach. I don't know if David, if I've explained that properly on your behalf. Thank you very much for stepping in to take the legal fiction for this. And John, I'd like to hand over to you, John, for the rest of this call, if you don't mind, to explain from common law court's perspective what the people are looking for.
Oh, thank you for the update and information. Hopefully now the people start to understand what is going on, certainly in relation to this case and also with the existing authorities within the UK. The common law court held one of the previous courts we held was to do with social services and the removal of children unlawfully by the state. The common law court jury at the time, a jury of 12 reasonably minded men and women, confirmed that the state and the authorities were guilty of various crimes in their approach towards children and the families concerned. Now, with the background there, you've got to remember when the common law court gets involved, it's literally on behalf of the people. Now, we have a previous order which had confirmed crimes by the state and certain individuals within the authorities and the failings within the system. Now, the common law court was set up to address such failings. The only reason the common law court exists is because the existing system is failing. Now, while there may be many people within the system, both within the social services and the police themselves, who are actively trying to do a good job in helping assist people, we find out that the system is failing and people are suffering as a result, which is why the common law court exists. Now, this information has also been made freely available because it is for the people within the common law court. Now, we don't stand under statutory legislation. We stand and confirmed our positions under common law. Now, in relation to the authorities involved in this case and the dispute, they claim that they have authority to deal with it, but they derive their authority through technically, which is blatantly slavery. It's as simple as that. The issue regarding slavery, it stems from the initial birth certificate for a child when the parents register the child's birth with the state. The state create what they call a legal fiction or a legal entity, and the state will only ever use that throughout your life. So they don't deal with a living man or living woman or even a child, which we class as property. They will only ever deal with a contractual issue, which is to do with a legal fiction. Now, with that, it gives power and authority to the social services and the court and the police. Now, because we're dealing with living men and women, they've actually confirmed through a declaration of their birth that they do exist as a living individual. Because the state had created this legal entity or the legal fiction, a fictitious name, they've done so fraudulently. So if we look at the establishment or the creation of this fiction, we look at their rules. Their rules are laws as far as they're concerned, but it's only company policy. It basically states that if there's an agreement between more than one party, it concerns more than one party, it becomes actually a contractual agreement. Now, again, using their own system, to have a contract that's valid, there are certain conditions that have to be fulfilled. Now, there's about 6 or 7 of them, and to be quite honest, I can't remember them all, but the only one that we need to establish or stick with is that there has to be full disclosure. And by that, meaning that every party to this contractual agreement has to be informed quite clearly about what's happening. Now, the child at the time who's been registered is not competent enough to obviously understand this is words, let alone this is a contractual agreement regarding their position, and the parents have never been informed either. So therefore, according to their own rules, the contract is invalid, it's void. And not only that, the continued use of the name by the state is fraudulent. So therefore, we have a situation whereby people can confirm their birth under common law by making a declaration. So it's simple and straightforward. You declare you're born, you declare when you're born, who your parents were. So that confirms that you're living. Now, because for everyday life, because we are actively involved with the state on a daily basis, and we continue to do so, you can look at things like even a bank card, credit card. You need to operate, you need to function. So in day-to-day life, you require the use of the fictitious name or the legal fiction, the legal entity. But the government have established that they've created it fraudulently. Their own rules state that they cannot use this and that the contract regarding the birth certificate is void. So therefore, to allow you to function, and because you have obviously this name attached to you by the state, which is in effect slavery, we're not trying to cancel the name, but what you would rightfully do is then protect yourself by claiming ownership. Now, any reasonably minded man or woman would actually state that if a birth name was created of this legal entity, the fictitious name, if it's created, the rightful owner should be the child that the name was attached to. So therefore, when a child reaches the age of 16, they can then claim ownership of this legal fiction for themselves. Now, having done that, that then removes any control that the state have at all, because the state have no ownership or no claim, and the only thing that they have a claim on previously was the fraudulent certificate that was created in the legal entity which was created at birth. So, having used this in a similar case in Scotland, what we've actually decided to do is to take ownership of the fictitious name, this legal entity, away from Leona. Now, bearing in mind, Leona's only 12, so until she reaches the age of 16, she doesn't actually qualify to obtain ownership herself, because having spoken to many people and within the common law court, it's been decided that until you reach an age of 16, you don't have the capability or capacity to obviously organise your own life and be responsible to take ownership of this fiction. Therefore, the fiction would remain as it was unless one of the parents had wanted to claim it, as they have a preferential claim. Now, in this case, Billy Peach, understanding the situation, Billy Peach had claimed ownership of the legal title. However, having done that and notified the appropriate authorities about the situation he's standing under common law, they have refused to acknowledge this or accept it. Now, they have no right to do so, because obviously the documents issued are lawful court deeds. So the fact that these authorities are refusing to accept that, and they're trying to punish not only Billy but Leona and to endanger her life, they should be held accountable, and they should be obviously prosecuted for their behaviour, certainly removed from their positions. However, on the issue at hand, because Billy was going to court, he'd asked for assistance in this, and then given the updates with Leona and what she'd actually decided to do, out of concern, we actually then spoke to Billy about the legal fiction and says, look, he said it would probably be better removing you from the equation completely, given your background. Billy consented to obviously pass on ownership of the legal fiction only for the use of this issue. So only for the use of this issue, the fictitious name was signed over to David Leahy. Now, David Leahy effectively owns the legal title. So any involvement with the state would have to go through David. Now, the interesting thing about this is what you've actually done is taken the legal title away from the child, Leona. Leona, her birth has been registered with the common law court, which means that she's a living child. She is the property of her father. Now, Billy had actually claimed ownership, had agreed to pass it on, but what we've done is we've removed the legal title away from Leona completely. So there is no legal fiction or fictitious name attached to Leona. So that leaves a living child who is registered under common law and has a document from a court, a stamped deed confirming that she lives. There is no fiction attached to her, as it's now the property of David Leahy. Any order issued would be issued against this legal title, and they cannot do so because they do not have consent to use this title, as David would have to obviously give consent to do so, and he doesn't consent. Therefore, the state have no right to use this title at all. And even if they did, any order they issued would be for the legal title. But what they're hoping to do is take the title, which is the property of David Leahy. They wish to take that title and attach it to a child and say, you will accept this title is attached to you, like a slave name, and then they'll use it to prosecute. But they cannot do that. They've committed fraud initially by creating the fiction, therefore they've lost the right to use it. We've taken the title away from the child, so therefore any action taken against the child or any abduction of the child is kidnapping. Now, we confirmed this in a case in Scotland with 5 siblings when they were removed from their family. Now, they were removed, a similar case, 5 children, and split up. They were homeschooled, and there was never a problem with the children, but the social services were aware that there was a concern that is given from neighbours and what was going on, and they came across the children. They found out that the children, the 2 youngest, didn't have a birth certificate, and that they didn't attend school as they were taught homeschooled. There was never a problem with them, but when social services found out, they actually went in and removed the children. Now, we assisted in that case as well, but having done so, they very quickly returned all the children, and the children have been back for 11 months. They were returned in January this year, and they're still at home now. So the point being is, the state have no authority whatsoever to remove a child because they fall out with their jurisdiction. They stand under common law, and the only jurisdiction they may have, supposed jurisdiction, would be against the legal title, which is not attached to the child. So again, to do this is yet again a criminal offence. And again, this whole procedure is used by the state, which is slavery, to target individuals. Now, I'm not going into issues of the money attached to this and various other things. This is from the state's point of view because we believe it's monetary. The issue is a vulnerable child is being targeted by the state, being removed unlawfully from her family, and possibly being handed back to a mother who was convicted of the abuse with a previous partner of her own daughter as a child. Now, any reasonably minded man or woman would believe that this should never happen. They would also believe and understand that what the state are doing is actually slavery, and that if you're not consenting to it, we then become a police state. Nobody's freedom is safe. Now, while we go on, we're aware that also there's an issue of vaccinations involved as well. Personally, my opinion doesn't matter. Everyone has their own choice, but when the government start dictating what you will and will not do, you're no longer free. We don't have a free country, and given the situation as it stands just now, we believe, and certainly I believe, that we must be at the forefront within the world, the countries in the world just now. Britain was praised in relation as one of the leaders in the slave trade centuries ago. They haven't obviously got rid of slavery. They've just changed the rules. They've hidden it. They've disguised it. We are still slaves, and Britain is at the forefront. As we can prove just now with this case. So again, as far as I'm aware, Billy and Leona are safe. There was no contact with them. Never met the guy. We said we'd assist with this court hearing coming up, but given the urgency in this matter, which we are concerned about as well, we suggest that the easiest way to deal with this is simply by having a meeting as soon as possible. Now, while I personally have been contacted by the police as well, we've assisted with them, and the one thing I'll point out is when this was brought to my attention, the paperwork was compiled to go into the services on the Wednesday. However, when we found out about Leona, the first thing we've done is we discussed the crucial update, added it immediately, and the first port of call was the police to notify them what was going on immediately. And we've also pointed out we're happy to assist in this matter because we're concerned about Leona. That is the priority. And yet, while we've emailed this in, and obviously one of the emails had been returned, the second one was not returned, which means that they have got one anyway. Nobody's actually picked this up to deal with it other than the police. So the social workers seem as if they're not concerned with this, and they may be waiting for the court hearing, but I think this behaviour is unacceptable, and the individuals concerned should be targeted or prosecuted and held accountable for this. And there's no way that the child should be returned home under these circumstances, and obviously they shouldn't be allowed to continue with what they're doing. So I'll hand you back just now. Obviously, this is pretty much the position we're at just now, but obviously this information will be going up for the benefit of the people in the Common Law Court. It goes up on the website, and we may obviously cover this in the coming days and weeks, so please keep an eye on this updates coming out.
All right, thank you very much, John. So basically, we're looking for an urgent meeting, an urgent hearing. Okay.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like the social services or the county solicitor to do?
They should be activating this. They should be instigating the hearing immediately. This is the social services, first of all, have to confirm that they are complying with their own legislation. Now, while it's not applicable to us, they have to comply with their own legislation, one of which is the existing Slavery Act. They do not do that. The state have no authority over this child and Billy. This is because they're both under common law. They have no authority, no jurisdiction. It's never been established. Now, obviously, even if this were to go back to court as well, it doesn't matter because the court has no authority to deal with it. The only way that they would have authority to deal with it is by basically confirming that we are slaves. As a free man, you have a right not to consent. If you choose not to consent, you stand out with their system. That's fine. Even their own legislation, the United Nations, state that you cannot be forced into their system. The Slavery Act in 2015, which is their legislation, also confirms that you can't be bound into slavery by any form. Now, the use of the legal fiction is a form of slavery. They cannot do it. So they are committing acts of slavery. Now, if they obviously accept that that's the case, they have no claim. Leona should be returned immediately, and the father, Billy, should be left alone. As it says, the court and the authorities have no authority at all. If they turn around and choose that they're not going to do that, they are guilty of binding the people into slavery. Now, there was a famous case, I'll go back a couple of 100 years ago, 200-300 years ago. It was a story of a slave ship called Amstrad in America. Now, while it was crucial, it involved the slaves who took over the ship at the time. Now, they made it into a film, which is actually quite good, called Amstrad. But basically, when the slaves, when they got the ship, the slaves had taken it over, they arrived in port, and what had happened is the slaves were put into prison and held captive. The ownership of the slaves was trying to be established, and various parties came forward to claim ownership. However, the slaves argued that they were living men and they were free. Now, it went on for a while, but what happened eventually is that a former president of the United States got involved in it. Now, it was John Quincy Adams. Now, he obviously was still a senator in America, but he decided to take on this case to assist. And he actually argued the case at the Supreme Court in America. Now, having done that, he put forward a case to 7 judges. Now, I believe 5 of the judges out of the 7 were slave owners. But he basically argued for the slaves, stating that if you're born free, you will always remain free. And if you've obviously forced into slavery, it's imprisonment, unlawful imprisonment, and it is slavery, and it will never wash. Now, the slaves were born free, and they were free men, so that was it. Now, if you were actually on a plantation and you were born to slave parents, the court has said that you then the child is a slave. Well, I disagree with that, because the Declaration of Arbroath in Scotland confirms otherwise. When you're born free, and this is applicable everywhere. However, in making his point, John Quincy Adams argued to the State Supreme Court of America that to confirm that these individuals were slaves would actually breach all of their existing legislation. And not only that, but the Declaration of Independence in America. Now, you can also say that this is applicable even to the Bible, and obviously various other things we have in this country, like Magna Carta, the Bill of Rights, Declaration of Arbroath. Now, effectively, if the social services, with the support of a court, were to rule against this and say that they had authority to take Leona back and remove her from her father, effectively, this is what they're doing, is confirming what slave owners. But not only that, in relation to these documents, including the Bible, this is the Declaration of Independence, Arbroath, the Bill of Rights, and Magna Carta, effectively, the court will be stating that these books and documents, founding documents, are useless. In fact, they'd actually be as well just telling us just to tear them up because they're useless. Is that what the court are actually trying to say within the scrutiny? Should we be tearing these documents up? Because if they're not being torn up and they're being used, they say they have no grounds whatsoever for what they're doing. But this was established in this court hearing by John Quincy Adams, and the slaves were all released and freed. Now, using that argument, which we done successfully in Scotland, we got 5 children back. Using the same argument for Billy and Leona, the same applies. The state cannot, unless they're binding the people into slavery, continue with what they're doing. They have to release Leona. They have to allow Billy off, because they have no authority and jurisdiction over a living man. There is not one piece of legislation anywhere, statutory legislation, that gives authority to the courts and the establishment authority over a living man. There's none. It does not exist. They cannot produce it. Therefore, they cannot proceed unless they're binding the people into slavery. It's as simple as that.
All right. Thank you very much, John. Thank you, David. I think we'll wrap it up there. Okay. Thank you guys for your time.